season is your most successful one yet. We're going to wait another minute or so just to give everybody some time to get logged in, so hold tight and we'll get started in just a second. All right, now that most everyone is logged in, we will officially get started. Again, thank you for joining GuideStar on our webinar, Getting Ready to Get Ready for Giving Season. Before we get started, there are a few logistics I wanted to cover so that you get the most out of today's webinar. We really want this to be an interactive conversation and encourage you to ask questions throughout the presentation. You can do this by submitting a question into the questions box on the control panel on the right-hand side of your screen. We will be saving your questions for our Q&A portion at the end of the webinar, but want to encourage you to submit your questions throughout the presentation. And to answer everyone's first question, yes, we are recording today's presentation and we'll make it available to you after the webinar. In the next day or so, we'll be sending out an email with the recording, the presentation slides, and some additional resources. So don't worry, you'll have access to all this information now and in the future. We also encourage you to connect with us on social media using the GuideStar and Classy handles and hashtag that you see on the screen. So now that the logistics are out of the way, let's get started. My name is Arielle Gart, GuideStar's Marketing and Outreach Manager, and I'll be your moderator for today's webinar. In my role at GuideStar, I implement many of our externally facing marketing initiatives, including managing our social media, webinars, and online fundraising. You may also not know that GuideStar is actually a nonprofit ourselves, so I, like many of you, will be implementing the great giving season strategies that will be shared with you today. Presenting on today's webinar, we are thrilled to have Megan Davidson, Account Manager at Classy. Megan works with over 140 nonprofits, providing strategic feedback and support to help organizations tell their stories effectively and engage donors and supporters. She enjoys helping nonprofits find new and appealing ways to diversify their fundraising. We've got a great webinar planned for you today. We're going to dive into the data insights from last year's giving season to look at trends and opportunities for improvement. We're going to walk you through how to create a detailed planning calendar to ensure you're on the right track from now through giving season. Then we're going to talk about how you can develop a strong and integrated promotional strategy, discuss the importance of donor segmentation in your communication efforts, and why you should make sure you're doing everything you can to take advantage of the opportunity Giving Tuesday provides. To help us jump right in, I'm going to turn things over to Megan Davidson. Megan, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Arielle. I'm excited to be here today. Please make sure you're chiming in with questions along the way. Happy to answer them at the end. And we'll kick things off by talking first about some of the insights from last year's giving season. For the majority of nonprofits, the end of the year is a crucial time for engaging your supporters. With so much riding on the last 5 weeks of the year, it's never too early to start planning, and it's in your best interest to engage strategic segments of your supporters across all channels on several occasions. During this webinar, we'll continue to use the term year-end to refer to Giving Tuesday through December 31st. Let's kick things off with a few insights from giving season last year.
And before we get into the details of the data, we do have a question for you, and we want you to use that questions box on the right-hand side to give us your answer. And that question is, when do you plan to deploy your year-end campaign? Type your questions in the questions box. We want to hear from all of you. So we've got some October 1st, Giving Tuesday, starts in September, November, August, Thanksgiving. So there's all over the board is when all the nonprofits that are on our webinar are planning to start deploying our year-end campaign. So it's getting a lot of feedback of all different types of dates. So it's more important than ever to get started now because everybody's got a bunch of different start dates for their end-of-year campaigns. Back to you, Megan.
Excellent. Okay, a couple statistics for you. In 2017 on Classy, over 25% of annual donation volume occurred from Giving Tuesday through the end of the year. This increase in traffic is driven by both the momentum of a dedicated day of giving and by tax deduction deadlines. Though a significant portion of giving still happens in the last few days of the year, about 12%, expanding your year-end campaign to encompass Giving Tuesday makes for a more robust and successful campaign overall. Jump-started by Giving Tuesday and continued through December, we continue to see some heavy-hitting statistics across Classy when reviewing year-end campaigns. The average donation from January 1st through November 27th of last year was $115 on Classy. During year-end, so November 28th to December 31st, that average jumped to $190, which is a 79% increase. Conversion rates across campaigns, or the numbers of supporters who make a gift compared to the number that visit the page, also peak in November and December from about a 28% average. Throughout year-end, the use of donation pages and crowdfunding pages increased dramatically. Donation pages have more than 50% of gross transaction volume, and crowdfunding campaigns account for about 30% of gross transaction volume. In particular, I find this last statistic really compelling. When many organizations are calling on their supporters to donate, I think there's an awesome opportunity to strategically engage some segments of your supporters by asking them to fundraise on your behalf. We'll talk more about that a little bit later. Before digging into more of the strategies for planning your year-end campaign, I did want to touch briefly on the change to tax laws, which most notably doubled the standard deduction. While we can't predict how the new tax law will impact year-end giving, we can share what we do know and talk a little bit about how our team is thinking about the change. With 21 million fewer households expected to itemize the charitable deduction, it's predicted that annual giving could decline by $16.3 billion, with donors in the middle class and the organizations that they support most likely to be affected. The new law also means that people will have more expendable income, but what's not clear is what they'll do with that extra cash. With the exact consequences of the new tax law still being uncertain, we encourage you to double down on your efforts to steward donors. Focus on giving your donors relevant and personalized content so when they do have that extra cash in hand, they're compelled to give it to you. For those individuals motivated purely by tax incentives, get with your team, brainstorm actions that you can take to counteract the impact of the report or the reform will have on your supporters' behavior. Finally, continue to look for ways to diversify your fundraising, whether it's with your individual donors, corporate partners benefiting from corporate tax cuts, or with donor-advised funds, which are exempted from capital gains taxes. As you start planning your year-end campaign, keep in mind the emphasis on your donors. Resist the urge to talk about your organization and keep language donor-centric, again, to strengthen their connection with you. With so many donations happening at the end of the year, it's in your best interest to plan your campaign early to make sure that your appeal stands out from other communications your donors are receiving. It's never too soon to start. As you start planning, you'll want to be aware of a few key dates to help you capitalize on occasions that will also be important to your supporters. Thanksgiving, Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and of course, Giving Tuesday. Last day of the year, December 31st, and then the religious holidays that your supporters may celebrate. Even though many of these are singular days, you don't want to simply email your supporters day of to ask them to donate. Think like a for-profit here. Commercial giants like Target or Walmart won't just have advertisements for Black Friday on November 23rd. They'll build a sense of anticipation with ads leading up to the big day of commerce. You'll want to create the same excitement and build up for the charitable arm of the Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and Giving Tuesday trio. Doing so can dramatically increase the effectiveness of your campaign. In other words, your year-end communications should start in early November, which means your campaign should be ready to deploy in October or so. You all are ahead of the game by getting the wheels turning today. So let's start by diving into some strategies to create a planning calendar and help you avoid feeling rushed once year-end hits. Start off by using your data. Take a look at previous year's campaign's results. What went well? What didn't? Look at last year and think about your key takeaways and how they can inform your strategy for this year. Next, you'll want to look at your donor data and understand the personas of those who gave last year. Were they new? Were they returning? And did your Giving Tuesday donors also make a gift in December? You can start to identify strategic populations of your supporters that you can engage by speaking to their interests, past gift history, and the different ways they currently support your organization. As well, start looking for new segments of donors that you can engage in a creative way. Next, make sure you're learning from others. I'm sure there are many of you out there who have other organizations that you admire or support. Take a look back at your emails from last year for inspiration and grab some new ideas to try out this year. As well, when you're getting started this early, it's a great time to secure your matching gift funds. Matching gifts are a common way to incentivize your donors by doubling their impact. And you can get creative here. Matching gifts don't necessarily have to come from corporate partners. They can come from board members or major donors that you want to engage in a new way. And the bonus here is that you're securing their gift early. Next, start to hone in on your particular strategy and craft your plan. Create your campaign's theme and story arc. As you craft your appeal, focus your language on your supporters, not on yourself or your organization. Again, make the story donor-centric. Introduce it and develop it over the duration of year-end. Think about how you can tap into the emotions of your supporters and frame their contributions as absolutely central to the success of the campaign or the solution to the problem that you are describing. Toward the end of the campaign, make sure to create a sense of urgency to compel your donors to donate. By September, aim to have your story arc completed and start preparing your campaign assets, so your materials for your website, social media, and email content. Think about how you'll integrate your online portion of your campaign with your offline presence. If your year-end campaign has a direct mail component, your story should be integrated across all modes. Online and offline are not distinct appeals. Continue the story for your donors across each communication that they receive. Your next step is to define your audience. How will you target different groups of donors? Through October, you'll want to lay out your high-level schedule. Outline what messages are going out via what mode of communication on what dates. Think, too, about which segments of donors should receive each of these messages. You may not send every piece of direct mail or every single email to every supporter. Once you have your outline schedule mapped out, start to flesh it out, and here's where you get creative. How will you tap into your donors' emotions and convey the impact of their contribution? Remember, keep things donor-centric here so they feel absolutely compelled to support you. You can also start to plant the seed in your October communications for what supporters will see in November and December. Come November, you'll be ready to rock and roll. Build excitement for your campaign and start communicating with your donors early on in the month. You'll want to send more than one email to build anticipation and make sure they know when they'll be called upon to take action. Using Giving Tuesday as a launchpad for your year-end campaign can be really successful because your supporters are out there looking to donate. Capitalize on the excitement of the day and roll it into the rest of your year-end campaign and communications. Whenever you do launch, make a big splash. Plan to email your supporters more than once in that first week. And if you're launching on Giving Tuesday, plan to send more than one email on that day in particular. A 2 to 3 part email series increases your response rate up to 4 times and almost doubles the average donation size, according to an M&R study. Next, we'll jump in and talk about how to successfully promote your campaign. Your communications are crucial to your campaign's success, so make sure you're also giving yourself time to plan out how you'll commit your campaign story to email, website, direct mail, and social media channels throughout the final weeks of the year. Successful year-end campaigns make sure to do 2 things. First off, they maintain cohesive messaging and branding across all modes of communication. Again, your offline and online components are not separate or distinct. They each contain crucial components to the story arc of your entire year-end campaign. Tap into each of your promotional channels to engage your supporters effectively. I'm going to turn things back quickly to Arielle as a GuideStar expert who's going to say a few words about how to set up your free GuideStar profile.
Thank you, Megan. So here's our kind of self-promotional plug here. One of the easiest things that you can do and quickest things that you can do right now to make an impact on giving season is to update your free GuideStar nonprofit profile. On your organization's profile, you can add contact information, addresses, social media handles, images, your logo. You can add board member and leadership information about your mission and programs, audited financial documents, and metrics to communicate the impact you have on the communities you serve. You can share more information by earning a GuideStar Seal of Transparency. The Seals of Transparency are not a rating. Each level of transparency is a step further in telling your organization's full story, and more importantly, each step is completely free to achieve. It just takes a little bit of your time. A brief rundown of each seal. Bronze is basic information, silver is financials, gold is all about long-term goals and strategies, and platinum shows the difference you are making by sharing year-over-year metrics. Your GuideStar nonprofit profile provides you with a platform to share your organization's story, not just with the more than 9 million people that visited GuideStar's website last year, but your information is amplified by the 200+ philanthropic websites and applications that use GuideStar's nonprofit data. And some examples of those organizations and platforms include Facebook, Amazon Smile, Volunteer Match, and major U.S. donor-advised funds. So a few minutes spent updating your nonprofit profile today can help you amplify your voice to millions now and throughout all of giving season.
All right, we'll switch things back over and talk about the second aspect of successful year-end campaigns, and this is reaching out to donors on multiple occasions across multiple channels. As I mentioned before, you want to build anticipation in October and November for your year-end appeal so your supporters get excited and know when they'll be called upon to take action. As you transition into year-end, make sure you share your Giving Tuesday results. So treat it like a campaign within a campaign in this regard. And then continue the emotional appeal and storytelling through November and December to keep your supporters engaged. Your communications should still be across all channels. Continue to email, continue to post on social. As your campaign continues, make sure you're using data from your supporters. For example, if someone hasn't opened 2 or 3 consecutive emails, you might want to avoid sending them any more asks until the last 2 weeks of the year. You don't want to risk them hitting unsubscribe by continuing to flood their inbox with messages that they're not taking action on. But if a donor has opened your emails and just failed to click through, continue to send them messages until they do so because they've shown you that they're interested at least in the content and just haven't been hooked yet. Try switching up your subject lines, email narrative, visuals, calls to action, and other elements to test what donors respond to. Once donors do make a donation, stop sending them appeals. Otherwise, you'll give the impression that you're not paying attention to their gift, and your emails will irritate them. Finally, toward the end of the year, aim to create a sense of urgency to encourage donors as you conclude your story and drive them to make their contribution. Because the last few days of the year are so volume high, remember about 12% of the year's giving in total, make sure to increase your asks as well. There's a correlation between an increase in email volume and increased revenue. All right, we're going to next check out a few of our favorite campaigns that had strong promotional strategies in their 2017 year end. Breast Cancer Research Foundation did an excellent job of building a consistent story across its end of year appeal last year. Breast Cancer Awareness Month is October, so BCRF starts its campaign communications in September to build anticipation for October. Throughout the month of October, they keep enthusiasm high by capitalizing on Breast Cancer Awareness Day, also in October, and engaging corporate partners that provide a match to the campaign for that day. These efforts allow BCRF to front-load donations, build momentum, and see early success as they move into the latter part of their campaign in November and December. They continue to develop their campaign story arc into Giving Tuesday and year-end donations to drive donations all the way up through the end of the year. Even though Giving Tuesday is a single day of giving, you should begin your outreach at the beginning of November regardless. Jill's House did an excellent job of this and raised triple the goal that they had set for themselves. At the start of November, they started talking about Giving Tuesday in their newsletters, on social media, and in dedicated emails. One of my favorite parts of their communication plan was the opportunity they gave to donors to sign up for a reminder to donate on Giving Tuesday. Come Giving Tuesday, they had a list of supporters already quote-unquote opted in to giving who they could email at the start of the day to get early donations and build momentum throughout the day. As Giving Tuesday continued, Jill's House kept donors engaged with updates on progress toward the $30,000 challenge match. Once they hit that $30,000 target around midday and secured the match from their partner, they kept enthusiasm high by focusing on impact. For every child that is removed from their waiting list, 4 more families begin the application process. They featured personal stories from families who had visited Jill's House, and then toward mid-afternoon announced another match for $10,000, which their donors continued to rally behind. All in all, they raised more than $100,000 just on this day. Because International also did an excellent job of appealing to their donors across all promotional channels. Again, no single channel, and that includes social media, is sufficient to be the only means of communicating with your donors. Increase your campaign success by weaving in elements of your story across email, your website, social media, direct mail, etc. Because International tied their communications together with a clever hashtag that married their specific concrete goal of providing 600 pairs of shoes to children with Giving Tuesday. They branded their appeal as Giving Shoes Day. They had a multi-channel approach that crossed their emails, social media, and website beginning 3 weeks before Giving Tuesday, which they treated like a micro appeal and a supplement to their overall year-end online fundraising goal. They tied the messaging of their brand, their catchy hashtag, and their tangible and specific goals to cohesively together and messaged these elements consistently throughout their communication avenues. After Giving Tuesday, they transitioned into their year-end appeal and capitalized on the progress they had made on Giving Tuesday. To continue with the momentum, they encouraged donors who had not given on Giving Tuesday with language like, if you forgot to donate, you can still give. And they segmented their communications by thanking those that had given and then removing them from year-end communications so as not to continue to flood their inbox. You've heard me say a few times that you want to email your supporters more than once, but you also want to make sure that you're purposeful in your emailing and not blanketing every supporter in your database with the exact same emails on every occasion. Let's next dive into talking about donor segmentation. In an increasingly digital age, your donors are going to get more emails now than they ever have before. Cut through the noise by segmenting your emails so that the content of your email and your ask are tailored to strategic subsets of donors. Segmenting communications results in higher open rates, lower unsubscribe rates, better deliverability, and overall greater revenue. Make sure that your emails are relevant to your supporters and reflect their previous support of your organization. You can segment donors in a number of ways. Again, look at your data and decide what makes most sense for you. You don't have to do all of these. Pick the ones that are most obvious, most easy to execute on, and build from there. You can look at the size of past gifts, segmenting your appeal according to donors' previous history. It's in your best interest because you can maximize results by putting suggested gift amounts in front of them that reflect their capacity to give. Your appeal should also reflect past giving behavior and maybe send recurring donors or a past fundraiser a different appeal than a new donor or a one-time donor. In keeping appeals personal, if you know your supporters' preferences, reflect them in your appeal by asking them to support a particular program. Finally, you can strategically engage supporters who haven't had a recent gift. Consider segmenting your appeal for volunteers, supporters that are on your blog or email list who haven't historically given, or for your lapsed populations, your Libunts and your Sybunts. These strategies can massively increase the effectiveness of your campaign. As an example, in their Giving Tuesday and year-end appeal, Charity Navigator was extremely purposeful in their segmentation, personalizing both email communications to donors as well as the campaign pages that they drove those donors to. Their end result was that 24% of their donors were net new, and their average year-end gift was 11% higher than what they saw over the rest of the year. Even when you wrap up your campaign, continue that segmentation right into your thank yous. Make your donors feel special so they continue to support you in future appeals. Again, a common and pretty easy one is to segment your thank yous by gift amount. You might not be able to send personal thank yous to every donor, but it's still a good idea to build special follow-up strategies, particularly for those who give larger gifts. Take a look at your data and try setting different threshold amounts for different types of outreach where you see trends emerge. For example, for large gifts, maybe those that are $400 or more, send a handwritten letter. Donors who made mid-sized gifts, $200 to $399, could receive a personalized email and a shout out on social media. And then lower gifts, $1 up to $199, maybe just a personalized email for them. You can also show your supporters that you pay attention to their gifts and interests by sending thank you messages that touch on the specific programs that they donated to. This level of personalization can impress your donors and show them that you really care. Even if donations don't come into a specific program, your thank you should still highlight impact. Explain where their money will go and how it will make a difference. Affirm your supporters' decision to give by describing how gifts like these have enabled your organization to make a lasting change in your field. When thanking donors, consider highlighting a short story about a beneficiary or telling a statistic about your cause to assure donors that their contributions will be used effectively. Finally, don't just stop at thank you. While new donor retention is 25%, retention of returning donors is significantly higher. Keep new donors engaged by following your thank you with a 2 to 3 part email series that includes additional resources to educate them about your organization and its programs. In your last email, ask them to opt into your newsletter so that they can become part of your regular communications and continue to be stewarded. We touched on this at the start of today's webinar and a few times throughout, but it bears repeating. Giving Tuesday is an opportunity that just can't be missed. We'll wrap things up today by talking in more detail about exactly why. In 2017, 3.4% of all transactions on Classy occurred on just Giving Tuesday. That's 13 times more than any regular day on the platform. And the amazing statistics don't stop there. Organizations acquire 3 to 5 times more donors on Giving Tuesday than on a regular day, and 15% of donors acquired on Giving Tuesday give again before the next Giving Tuesday. Giving Tuesday also generates twice as many new donors as December 31st, and 3 times as many new donors as a regular day during disaster relief. Revenue-wise, Giving Tuesday generates 13 times as much money as a regular day. In other words, both new and returning donors are out there ready to give. Make sure it's to you. Giving Tuesday donors are motivated supporters. Not only are they more likely to give again before your next year-end campaign, but they're also more likely to be fundraisers than other year-end donors. 3 to 4 times more likely, in fact. So both new and returning donors are out there looking to support organizations that they care about. Make sure that they're giving to you. For additional insights into Giving Tuesday, you can head to the Classy blog to download the State of Modern Philanthropy, and we'll also be sending out this link to download in the follow-up email that you'll receive after the session. Here we'll touch on a common question I get as an account manager here at Classy. Giving Tuesday is a powerful start to your year-end campaign, and excitement's going to naturally build among your supporters who celebrate and or participate in Thanksgiving, Black Friday, and Cyber Monday. After those couple days of gluttony, you can give your supporters a means of feeling good by supporting your awesome work. But if you don't have time to create a separate and unique appeal from what you were planning for your year-end story, just don't. We talked earlier about some of our favorite year-end campaigns that were super effective. Both Breast Cancer Research Foundation and Because International used Giving Tuesday to launch their year-end campaigns and extended the same story throughout. Develop your storyline over those 5 weeks of the year, strategically engage supporters to keep their emotions and excitement high, provide matching gift opportunities, competitions, and incentives like donor shoutouts or even swag. In the day or two after Giving Tuesday, make sure you thank your donors and segment your next approach. Either opt them out of year-end communications or include them in progress updates only, or perhaps softer asks like consider donating again or share this campaign. Depending on the readiness of your Giving Tuesday donors, you could also consider engaging them in creative year-end efforts, like asking them to fundraise on your behalf as part of a peer-to-peer campaign. Just to give a little context to some of those strategies and statistics, we'll jump into a few of our favorite Giving Tuesday campaigns in particular. This one from Lawyers for Children is one of my favorites from Giving Tuesday of last year. They have excellent images to hook their supporters' attention. Really, how cute are those kids? And they make their creative match for new donors and increased gifts from returning donors a prominent section of their campaign page. They also use their donors' giving history to outline different suggested gift amounts and tie them to the impact these gifts could make, like supporting legal and social work services for an abused or neglected child. Here's an example from Amar US of a peer-to-peer campaign, unique among the many crowdfunding campaigns and donation pages that you'll find at year-end. Amar US's supporters are called on to broaden their impact of their contribution by fundraising on the organization's behalf. The beautiful design is reminiscent of a microsite, and they do an excellent job of featuring individual stories to foster connection with potential donors and bring life and variety to the campaign page. Our final favorite campaign isn't quite a Giving Tuesday campaign, but it's an awesome example of a creative appeal from an organization that knows its supporters and what motivates them. Released in November and positioned as a Thanksgiving holiday alternative, Woodstock Sanctuary positions donations as turkey sponsorships. They send donors a card, a photo, and the rescue story of donors' new turkey friends. They further empower supporters to spread the word, encouraging these sponsorships as gifts and thought-provoking centerpieces for the Thanksgiving table.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Megan, for all that great insight. It was a lot of information in a short amount of time. So we know that there are a lot of questions that have come through our questions box, but please keep submitting questions. We have a good amount of time to get to as many questions as we can today. So we're excited to open the floor to get all of those burning questions answered. That being said, we may not get to every single question that was submitted during the webinar, but we'll do our best to follow up with each of you that we don't get an answer to via email after the webinar is concluded. So we'll kick some things off with some of the questions that have come through earlier during the webinar. And one of those is from Elise, and she's asking about what are suggestions for gaining and maintaining recurring donations during the end of year marketing push. You know, I think it's a lot of energy and effort to get somebody to give just that one time. What are different tools and tricks that can encourage people to donate, not just that one time, but kind of a rolling donation or recurring donation?
Sure. Elise, I love where your head's at. I'm sure you've heard the statistic that recurring donors are 440% more valuable to an organization over their lifetime than recurring donors. So love that you're thinking ahead about how to grow that community. What I'd recommend is taking a look at your supporters and identifying populations of folks that might be ready to make this shift. So a couple easy ones that come to mind. Maybe take a look at folks who've given $100 in years past. You can craft a storyline around why $10 a month is a beneficial donation to your organization for that consistent approach, partnership that they're forging with you, and inside scoop that you can offer to that donor by being part of your year-long efforts. Other common populations that we see be really effective for those recurring donations are donors who've given more than once in a calendar year. They're showing already that they're ready to support you in an ongoing fashion. So grab people with 2, 3, 4, etc. gifts in the same 12-month period. And then finally, I always like to take a look at maybe just your longtime givers in general. Who's got a 5-year giving history that is a consistent supporter and could be receptive to that ongoing support. You can also take a look internally. So it doesn't necessarily have to be your donors per se. If you've got a staff that's willing to give, a board that's willing to give, or volunteers, those are all good people to take a look at what you know about those populations and decide whether or not they're a good place to start building that community. It does take time to grow, so having some of that early groundswell and momentum, maybe recognizing them as founders and offering early incentives, can help you start to lay that groundwork, build a community, highlight their stories, and then expand to other populations of supporters.
Awesome. That was a lot of great kind of tips and tricks that I think you can start implementing right now. Another question's come in from Norm, asking about recommended software applications for tracking donors, specifically something that's, you know, not expensive, but that works really well. Do you have any recommendations for something like that?
Sure. I think tracking gift history is really important. You want to be able to reflect their giving history, their contact information. I would recommend taking a look at different CRM systems that'll allow you to track the different aspects of behavior that are important to your organization.
Wonderful. And then we did get another question from Margaret. They're unfamiliar with Classy platform. Can you briefly describe Classy and the work that you guys do?
Sure. We're an online fundraising suite. We've got a couple different campaign types that really allow you to amplify your storytelling, reach your donors, and highlight your organization. We have crowdfunding campaigns, peer-to-peer campaigns, and then events, so tapping into the variety of ways that your supporters give to you and support your mission.
Great. We got a question from Greg, who's asking about, to stand out from all the other nonprofits asking for support on Giving Tuesday, would his organization be better served focusing on a campaign for October 1st as opposed to waiting till Giving Tuesday? And I think that's a really relevant question because there is a lot of noise around giving season, specifically Giving Tuesday. So, what can nonprofits do to stand out, and should they consider potentially an earlier approach as well?
Sure. Greg, again, love where your head's at. Hear this question all day long. And I think it really depends on what you know about your supporters. So making sure that you're appealing personally to them and about what they care about. So programs, maybe perhaps your efforts, impact over the years past, those communications are more likely to be relevant or more likely to be acted upon if they're relevant. So not so much a question of timing, but making sure that you're compelling them to open that email and feel compelled to give. Subject lines are your best friend here. You can try out things at work. Great idea to start building that anticipation in October. So similar to what Breast Cancer Research Foundation does with capitalizing on Breast Cancer Awareness Month, you can give that build up so that your donors know what to expect and when to give.
Great. And we got a really interesting question from Lisa, one that I've actually wondered myself, which is it acceptable to use similar marketing materials from last year in this year's giving season, or should you kind of reinvent the resources and imagery every single time?
That's a great question as well. Thanks, Lisa, for throwing that one out there. I think that's a really good point to take a look at where you can be effective and strategic as a team. I'd encourage you to segment your approach in that regard. So a donor that gave last year is probably going to recognize that recycled material. If there's a way you can strategically swap out some of the text, perhaps some of the images, so it doesn't look entirely duplicate, that would be really helpful. But your new donors, they're not going to have recognized that, or they're not going to have seen those materials before, so they'd be a fine population to send the same things as last year if it was effective in your communications.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's great insight. I feel like if it worked, you definitely want to keep the elements that were really successful in the campaign that you've had previously. But obviously, if there may have been some kind of challenges or issues, you certainly don't want to just send it again without making any changes, because then you most likely won't see a different result.
Exactly.
And we've got another question here. This one's from Crystal. She says that they've tried direct mail in the past, but hadn't found any definitive return on investment from it. Is there something else that they should be doing that's kind of really encouraged, where it's a little bit more measurable results?
Sure. So I think direct mail is not going away. It's a great way to personalize your outreach. Again, in the vein of segmentation, it doesn't mean that every single supporter has to get it. So maybe it's more effective if you take a look at who does respond to that outreach. Maybe it's just your higher end donors. Maybe it's folks that are longtime givers. Look and see if there's a population that stands out for which that direct mail component does resonate. And then segment communications to other supporters in other ways: website, email, social media, perhaps radio broadcasts, to find a little bit better of a return. As far as marrying those two approaches, typically what we see be most effective is pairing a direct mail outreach with 3 to 4 or so emails. Email is a little bit of a faster mode of transmission. Don't need to send nearly as many pieces of direct mail in your communications.
And then we have an actually question relating to GuideStar from John Queel. He says, we're a new agency. Can we set up a profile on GuideStar? And the answer to that is absolutely. There are two ways that can happen. One is that you can reach out to us on our website, GuideStar.org, and select kind of claim your profile. And that will allow you to work with our team to submit the paperwork to get a profile for you up and running. And then we also create profiles for any nonprofit that's listed through the IRS if you filed any of your tax forms. So if you have already existed for more than 1 year and you've already filed your taxes, most likely you have a very basic profile on GuideStar.org. We've got over like 1.7 million active nonprofits listed. But that just means that the only information on that profile is that what you submitted from the IRS. So it's up to you to go in there and update your profile like I was talking about earlier and really making it a robust platform to tell your story and more than just your financial reporting. And we have another question here. This one is from Kristen, and she'd like to know how you suggest small organizations, so ones with a budget of less than $1 million, approach this time of year. Kind of what should they be doing to get the highest impact with limited resources?
Sure, that's a great question. I think it's really looking at what worked for you last year and being strategic about what new initiatives or what new strategies you want to employ this year. Threw out a ton of things and a ton of options today in the webinar. It doesn't mean you have to adopt absolutely everything. That's a lot of change and a lot of new stuff to get used to. So knowing what you know about your staff, your organization and its capacity, and your supporters, pick the couple that stand out that you can actually evaluate effectiveness well. So grab the 2 or 3 that resonate the most and try those this year. It doesn't mean that you can't iterate and A/B test as the year continues, but be strategic in how much change you're really taking on.
Great. And Annie asked, should we use a separate fundraising site for our year-end push or direct people to our donate button on our website? Any thoughts on that?
Oh, Annie, I love that question. I think that's such a great one to be thoughtful about what your donors are going to see. Novelty really resonates well with people. So if you see heavy traffic to that online donate button, it's going to be a page that's not going to get them excited or put them in the holiday spirit as much as a branded campaign page. That being said, if you're really strapped for time, if you've got the flexibility to swap out some language and imagery on that donation page, at least make it holiday themed or end of year themed in some regard so that it's a novel experience for donors who are likely to have supported you at other points in the year. That's
great. And Elizabeth wants to know if you're a brand new organization, you only have a few months history or even less than a year, is there anything that you would recommend that they do to help them stand out on Giving Tuesday and kind of get more of that market share and make themselves more well known? That's a great question. I would really focus on your story arc here. So having a really powerful and compelling narrative behind your campaign. I also saw this question, so we'll tack this one on in here too. What I mean by story arc, if you think of like a fairy tale, you're setting the ground, you're laying out the details, framing the problem, creating that sense of urgency, and you're developing that arc with a sense of progress, and your donors is really the superhero here. How can they help you change the world with their actions? Drive them to feel that they're intimately involved in the success, and then that culmination, that wrap up of that story is their donation. So you want to really continue to develop exactly how much impact they're having for you. Having that powerful emotional appeal can help even brand new organizations maximize their impact because they're framing themselves as one, solving important problems, but two, bringing donors into that sense of community and mission. And Adam would like to know if you can go a little bit more into what you mean by donor-centric language. Sure, love this question. Thanks, Adam, for calling me on my jargon there. So one thing you want to think about is how you can say more sentences that start with you as opposed to I or we. So you, donor, are central to our success. You, donor, can provide shoes to a child in Africa who doesn't have any. As opposed to me, my organization, I go and provide shoes. Still the same story, but the personal appeal and the sense of community and urgency is much increased when you're bringing the donor along for the ride and framing them as central to the story. Oh, that's great. And, you know, we talked a lot about email specifically on the webinar, but Julia wants to know if we have suggestions for communicating with potential donors who they may not have the emails for? Are there any other recommendations besides email and direct mail that you would recommend?
Sure. So I am assuming that you probably have either phone numbers or addresses that you're reaching out to them in some regard. Use the data that you have. Be strategic, though, in setting yourself up for future appeals. So maybe with their donation, ask for more information. We see the same things on the online side. If you want to send that personalized outreach with a mailed letter as a thank you, we see organizations ask for addresses to round out their data. So use the data that you have to reach out to folks. If it's entirely word of mouth, rally your staff, rally your friends and family to get those donors and grab information along the way as you ask them to support you.
That's great. And Celeste wants to know about how you feel about reaching out to new potential donors for Giving Tuesday. She feels that she gets a lot of appeals on that day from organizations she's never heard of before. So wanting to figure out kind of when the right time to start talking to these new donors is, if it's Giving Tuesday or before or after.
That's a great question, Celeste. I think that knowing that you're looking at these communications and haven't heard of them before means that you're at least opening the email. So there's something about them piquing your interest, whether it's their subject line or who it's from. So it sounds to me like their communications are effective, but a little bit surprising. You weren't expecting them to land in your inbox. And that's why we recommend starting communications a couple weeks ahead of time. So beginning of November, start to advertise that you're going to be participating in Giving Tuesday, highlight your impact over the course of the year and maybe why Giving Tuesday and the initiative that you're pursuing is so important, so that donors don't see that email just on that Tuesday and wonder who the heck you are. You can also really set yourself up well for success with new donors in particular by showing that there are other people out there in the world that support you and already know about you. So if you're not familiar, I'm going to talk briefly about a soft launch and a hard launch. Best practice is to grab a strategic population of your supporters as a soft launch audience. These are people that are already familiar with your work and are 90% ready to give. You can think of probably some folks that if you turn around and ask them, they would contribute. They can be power fundraisers, heavily involved volunteers, friends and family, again, staff and board. Doesn't have to be a massive group, but it helps you get some donations on the board before Giving Tuesday itself, so you're launching with some progress already. That soft launch audience is helpful because it shows, again, that there are other people out there that support you, and you're not starting at zero. It can be a little intimidating to be first. So if you're launching your campaign with absolutely nothing on your thermometer, it can be a little daunting to be the first one that throws on $5 or $25 to a larger goal. So your soft launch audience can help mitigate that, build that early progress, and then people tend to jump on board and give the closer campaign is to goal. It's called the goal proximity effect. Here's the one time I get to use my psych major in my life. People love being part of a winning team. So you'll see more donations and higher donations the closer to goal. Take advantage of that cognitive bias and use your soft launch audience to help you get a leg up before Giving Tuesday even starts.
That's some really great insight. I think we've seen a lot with our campaigns that the higher we get to our goal, the more kind of people we have that really want to help us get there and kind of contribute towards the end.
Exactly. It's the same reason that you remember the guy who scored the game-winning basket, but not the person who put the first 2 points on the board.
No, that's very, very true. We've gotten a couple of comments or questions from very, very new nonprofits that this is their first giving season campaign. Are there, 2 or 3 specific things that you would encourage them to do? Because I think the concept of launching a massive giving campaign can be really overwhelming, but are there just a couple of quick wins or small things to do to get them started?
Yes. That soft launch one, I think, is really effective. You probably have people who are close to you and familiar with your organization already that you can lean on to help you start you off successfully. Second strategy I'd really recommend in that vein is make a big splash when you do launch and reach out to your broader list of people. That's 2 to 3 emails. Can't say that enough times. Don't be a single email that's forgotten in an inbox. Make your campaign's launch and the problem you're solving or the goal that you're setting really important. Middle of the campaign, Here's one where if you've got the space and time for it, it's a great time to throw in some incentives, maybe shout outs to donors already, progress updates, challenges to see how many donations can come in the middle of that stretch. But if you have to downplay one, that might be one that you de-emphasize over making sure that you're creating a sense of urgency and increasing communications as your campaign wraps up. So that 12% of giving happening in the last couple days of the year, that one's really powerful. Almost the same way you launch with a big splash, you want to wrap up with a big splash as well.
That's some great insight for those new organizations. Leslie asked about the best way to use matching funds. Is it to inspire new gifts, maintain renewals, increase gifts? Any specific feedback on matching funds?
Oh, I love that question. Matches are an awesome way to appeal to people and make them feel that their gift is going farther. So I think, again, taking a look at what really resonates with your audience, how you've positioned matches in years past can really be helpful there. It can also be a really awesome part of your story arc. The U.S. Soccer Foundation, for example, it's $10 to provide a soccer ball to youth in an underserved community. Their match, rather than talking about the $5,000 available from a board member, talk just about the impact. $10 becomes 2 soccer balls. You're helping double the amount of students get access to the game that's changed your life. So I think in engaging your supporters, think about what's going to resonate with them, whether it's the overall goal that you're helping achieve, maybe $60,000 for a new part of a community center, or whether it's that personal story and reaching 2 kids instead of 1.
That's great. And we've got a couple of questions about recommendations for CRM systems. Is that any insight that you can provide there? I know we talked a little bit about CRM systems earlier.
Sure. So recommendations for CRM, again, I think take a look at what the data is that your organization needs. Salesforce has an awesome nonprofit starter pack that helps make it in a cost-effective system for donors. They've got an open API as well, which means that you can hook up a lot of your other tools in your tech stack to integrate with them. But there are a couple ones out there depending on the needs of your organization for data and size and whatnot.
No, that's great. I think that will be really helpful, a great way to get started. Are there any specific tactics that you think that they should be implementing to help them increase their donor base? If it's not already a contact that they have in their system, are there specific places that they can be looking to try to generate more people that could become potential donors?
Sorry, I had a little trouble with the audio there. Let me just make sure I'm answering the right question. The person was looking for tactics to increase their donor base?
Yes. So if there's somebody that's not already in their database system to email, are there places they should be looking to find new potential donors that already aren't under their fold?
I think this is a great one to take a look in particular at social media. Again, it's not going to be the place where you're going to find all of your donations. You should not run your campaign only on Facebook or only on Instagram. But both of those mediums are an awesome place to build community, and you can take advantage of things like paid advertisements, promoting a post, and driving people to join the community. Get them on your email list and steward them from there. So things like a clever hashtag can help you gain momentum, just like Because International and their Giving Shoes Day hashtag.
Well, that's great. And I think I agree that if you see somebody sharing your messages, liking your messages, chances are they're really engaged in the work that you're doing. So kind of reaching out to them directly in whatever way you can would be definitely very helpful. There are also a couple of other questions about recommendations for either platforms for kind of sending emails and newsletters, developing a calendar, their marketing. Are there any kind of platforms that you find nonprofits are really successful with that some of these nonprofits can look more into?
Sure. There are a lot of systems out there in this regard, so I recommend kind of asking contacts that are similar to your organization or folks that have been with different organizations in the past for maybe some of their preferences. MailChimp and Constant Contact are quick and easy ones that come to mind. Both have a free version before you get to the paid version if you're looking for an easy way to create some branded emails without having to fully invest in a system.
Oh, that's great. There's another question here that I think is a great question, and it's a small organization, and she's basically saying if there is one takeaway that they can implement from this webinar, what's like the one thing that you would recommend that they do if there's nothing else that they can do? What's that one big thing?
Send more than one email. Don't wait until December 30th or December 31st. Yes, there's a lot of new donors out there, but building anticipation ahead of time, giving your donors a heads up, and developing that story are a phenomenal way to compel people to give. You don't want to lean just on the end of your tax deduction message, particularly with changes in legislation now. So investing in your donors as part of the story is my number one recommendation.
Oh, that's great. And we do have a couple of questions about the new tax law. We're not going to address them here, but we will be sending out some additional resources that you can look at to get a little bit more information about the new tax law and how it affects charitable giving and nonprofits. So stay tuned for that in our follow-up email that we'll send out to you tomorrow. And we're getting close on kind of our end time, and we've gotten through quite a few of these questions. So I want to thank you all for submitting all of these wonderful questions about giving season and how your organization can be really proactive in raising funds and maximizing the giving season. And we've answered a lot of your questions, so now we have one final question for you, and that is, what else do you want to learn about year-end giving? Send all of those answers into our questions box as well. We'll be looking at this information to help us try to figure out kind of future content, future webinars. You know, I think with giving season, it's something that can always be talked about, even on October 1st, on March 20th. So we want to make sure that we're always talking about what's really relevant to you. We're trying to figure out what we can do to help make sure that you're thinking about giving season all the time. And so we've gotten a few answers in here of what people want to learn more about for year-end giving, and some of them are segmentation in your messaging. That's definitely really, really valuable if you can do it right. One's about crafting an effective email from subject line to message, length, format, etc., which is definitely something interesting that we can delve more into in future conversations. You know, focusing on nonprofits that, you know, strategies for nonprofits that are smaller versus strategies for nonprofits that are larger. I think that makes a lot of sense as well. Going more into that, creating that story arc, really kind of getting in there into the nitty-gritty and helping people find those answers, building a capital campaign I see coming in here, year-round giving, not just focusing on the giving season. There's a lot of really great suggestions and recommendations coming through, so keep those coming. We'll be looking through all of those and trying to figure out how we can incorporate them into our future conversations. But we do really appreciate your time this afternoon. We know you guys are very busy, have a lot going on, and we just really value the time that we've been able to spend with you today to share with you some of our thoughts and ideas about how you can be most prepared for giving season. I want to thank Megan for being on with us today, for sharing her expertise and her experience, and to Classy for helping partner with us on this webinar today. We really appreciate your time, and look for an email from us in your inbox tomorrow with the recording of the webinar, the presentation slides, and some additional resources that you can use to increase your end-of-year fundraising. Thank you all so much, and have a wonderful afternoon.